today I'm covering comic book characters and evolution and when they appear in the comics themselves. First, we'll start with my favorite heroes of comics, the Hulk. Now, the Hulk had different artwork designs. Some may look like closer to what you think what the Hulk would look like, others not so much. Firstly, we have the first appearance look of Hulk, aka the Grey Hulk. And this has been designed all throughout the entirety of the solo series of the first through the sixth issue, to the entirety of Tales of Astonish, and even in all his appearance up until that point of the Avengers issues. And then next, after the Tales of Astonish title had dropped, we then finally see the Hulk in this style of writing. Well, in this look. This Hulk didn't last as long as the other Hulk look, and so when Return of the Grey Hulk, he had a slightly different look. This Hulk lasted by near the tail end of the 80s, all the way up until the entirety when the Grey Hulk was still a thing. After the entirety of the Return of Grey Hulk. Now, since he became Professor Hulk, he had another different look. The Professor Hulk lasted shortly, but after he became Professor Hulk, he had this look up until near the middle of his second volume. And we all had the Hulk look we all know and love. Lasted into many stories. War Hulk, Planet Hulk, War Hulk, and even the Exiled series, where, of course, this look almost nearly came around. Now, this look of the Hulk came revised as time moved on, but then we have his look in the Immortal Hulk. This look of the Hulk in the comics is pretty much was for the entirety of the Immortal Hulk line, and then we have this both look after by shortly, and then his look from the new volume. Now, Batman is an interesting case because he had many main looks, including looks from alternate universes. We have his first appearance look, which, unlike the Hulk, had actually lasted shortly until the debut of Dr. Hugo Strange. This look for Batman lasted entirety up until the debut of Robin. Then when Robin debuted, he had that look too considered. It wasn't until we got very close to the Adam West Batman that we got that design of Batman, and that lasted shortly for a few years in the 60s. And then we had his near mid to late 60s look, and then after another few short years, we then had the look of Neal Adams and Dennis O'Neil. This lasted until the entirety of the rest of the 60s, and into the 70s and 80s. Up until Nightfall. That's right, the event where Batman's back was broken by Bane. Once after a while of returning after Nightfall, he then got an entirely different look. And this one was his longest look that he had for a while. Yes, there were a couple revival versions of the look, but then we come to a couple of other looks that he had up until the New 52. After a while of the look he had another look in the comics that lasted by the No Man's Land story. And then up until that point, we had Batman Hush. A look that he had, and then we had his New 52/Rebirth design. And then after that, we have his next and final current look in comics, the Absolute Batman. Well, not really. Ever since the 1,000 issues of Detective Comics, we had a current look of Batman, one that would stick for a while, and the Absolute Batman still had his design of comics. Another character that had different ways of how long they changed their looks throughout the comics is, of course, the other one of the trilogy, Wonder Woman. She had her original look from the entirety of the Golden Age and into the Silver Age, but by the late 60s, she kind of had a different look up until the post-Crisis reboot. By that time, her look had stayed consistent up to that point, up until she appeared in one of the issues of a series called Batman/Superman. And then we had her Rebirth/New 52 look. Then, after the 800th issue, we had another new look of Wonder Woman. And then, of course, who can forget about Spider-Man? Good old Spidey. Well, not entirely me, of course. Spider-Man had his looks changed over the years. We had his earlier look when he debuted in Amazing Fantasy number 15. Then, when John Romita Jr. took over during 1966, we had Spider-Man's other look that he had by the rest of the 70s and into the time when he had the black suit, the symbiote suit. And then when we finally remove it in the debut of Venom, he had another look that lasted for a short while. Then we had his mid to late 90s design. Then after that, we have another look that had that started with the Volume 2 relaunch of Spider-Man. And then after a while, that design only lasted like near a decade, and then we had another design of Spidey. Soon we had a couple of other designs in Spider-Man weren't very long, and then we had one that he had starting with the 5th volume relaunch. First was the one where it had the Kurt line. That was the short-lived line of Spider-Man comics up until the Superior Spider-Man. Then after he came back to normal, after being Superior Spider-Man, then we had the look that lasted up until the 5th volume relaunch, and then we had a different Spidey look to it. Our next hero he once covered that had the most changes over the years of what comic they appeared in was Superman. First was the original look of the most of the Golden Age and Silver Age. But it's like Wonder Woman during the late 60s. He had a change of design that wasn't as memorable, but was still there. But during the 70s and the Bronze Age in the early 80s, we had the setup to the New Earth. And as soon as the New Earth had started, that's when we had the iconic look that Superman had up until near a decade, and then we had another Superman look that lasted up until near the end of the Adventures of Superman line of comics. And then, just like all the others, we had both his new 52 looks. First was his appearance in the start of it, where he was just wearing just short pants and a t-shirt that had a symbol on it. Then in the New 52, when he finally had his full costume, this one lasts until, once again, his 1000th issue of Action Comics. And then we had but we still have this look of Superman even to this day, even when the absolute Superman was still around. And of course, we have the fastest man alive, the Flash. Now, when he originally debuted, he wasn't really the iconic Barry Allen version. But as time moved on, we had different looks for the Barry Allen version. We had the original version that lasted through the Silver Age and into the Bronze Age, up until his death, and we had a DC New Earth. But once he came back to life, we had a short new design for Barry Allen that lasted shortly, and then the New 52 happened, and yeah, this where Barry Allen got the New 52 design, and it continued on until near the start of Rebirth. And then finally, let's finish off with the most interesting character to finish off, or groups of them, the Fantastic Four. First, there was their original looks in the comics that lasted throughout the earlier years of Fantastic Four, and then we had their 70s, late 60s and 70s look, and then early to late 80s, and then we had to look to late 80s to 90s. And then we have the look start. Finally, we have the look up and after their 500th issue. And then after their 500th issue, and after that, we have a couple more, starting with after and during, after the Civil War, and then after that, after their issue, their latest issue legal launch. I'm that comic guy. See you next time and this Tuesday. Bye.